now basically after the initial exclusivity is over, we'll work with other partners. But we wouldn't have gone there if basically we're not seeing the clock ticking on the existence of our company. But some of those things basically, like under stress situation, you get very creative. And that was another thing that, again, basically is a paradigm of our current business model.
So same question I asked others. What are the key metrics that you use? You go into the office in the morning. I know you're a metrics-driven guy. What are the 3 or 4 metrics that you sort of look at to determine the health of the business?
Yeah, I think when you're devising a metric, you need to figure out who your constituents are and what matters to them. So to me, basically, like for consumers, our metric is how many page views per session and how many uniques are coming in. And then you can kind of see all the details behind it. For partners, they care about one thing and one thing only. How much revenue are you generating for me? So basically, there I look at how much sales activity is going on per partner total. And for basically our advertisers, it is value delivered to them. So you basically kind of look at how much leads are being generated or coupons are being printed, how much page views visits are they getting. So you look at basically, look at the constituent you're influencing and get very crystal clear in terms of what value they care about. And this is another thing that I would recommend you guys do, and it's an evolution. You're always constantly learning. And you need to build a team that always challenges status quo. And you need to keep reminding them that on a scale of 1 to 10, externally we may be 9, but internally we need to be closer to 1. 1 being sucky and 10 being awesome. And if you have that mindset, you basically constantly evolve and constantly listen to your customers. And that's something basically you just need to learn. And it's the amazing stuff was like, when I joined Amazon.com, we were at a certain conversion. And 8 years later when I left, basically that conversion was 8x higher. And there's not a single thing I can point to which was basically 90% explanation of that. It was just tons and tons of small things coming together and then actually causing the whole impact.
Well, it was about the Facebook thread, so I don't want to. So when people are using Facebook and making their apps popular on that, are they limiting their future reach? I mean, if they're basing their business model based on Facebook, and so I mean, when you guys are gonna, you said that everybody needs to have a strategy to integrate more with Facebook. I mean, how much do you want to do? I mean, can you have an entire company based off Facebook, like the one that you mentioned?
So Vantages has their own site, which looks exactly like, when you go to Vantages, it looks exactly like the Facebook, right? So they're not going to be completely dependent on Facebook. They use Facebook to drive traffic, but all the real stuff happens on their own site.
You're hinting at a model that actually was Facebook's earlier model, where everybody would build an app for Facebook, and you tended to risk spending development time and resources around the Facebook HTML code and that thing. And it ended up just recreating your service inside of there, and then you needed to do that on the web again. And that model is no longer. And Facebook's actually done a good job pivoting to create APIs and a more open model where your website and Facebook coexist. It's the same code. And that actually then solves a lot of your questioning.
I think as a startup, you fix resources. And the thing that I really like that what Google and Facebook has done is brought average startup to compete with very large companies, because if you go back 20, 30 years back, distribution was very expensive to build. So my encouragement to startup, if you're basically in the early stages, just get something going. It's a big incubator for us where you can tap into other people's traffic. Get some traction, and over time, you can figure out about diversifying your risks and all that stuff. But I won't spend too many cycles from an early stage, because half of the ideas that you'll try there anyway are not going to turn out okay. So just use these opportunities to basically prove out your ideas, and then worry about basically diversifying distribution over time.
It's amazing. I was at Startup Weekend this past weekend, which is a great, local organization. And it's amazing what you can build in a weekend with now with Amazon Web Services and even the various payment options you have. And if you have a good developer and an interesting idea, for almost nothing, you can test and see whether or not you got something that's worthy of some traction.
And hey, who won that?
He did.
But it was amazing. What's amazing is there was 22 teams, and everyone had working. Most of them had working sites up and running and customers. I mean, it's just like in a freaking weekend. I mean, in a weekend, who does that? Can you imagine 5 years ago, this wasn't possible? 3 years ago, I mean, it's all the sort of stuff that you now, whether it's a Facebook app, whether it's a regular sort of, you can build and get something out and test it and see what customers think for a fraction of the cost of what you could have a couple of years ago. Sanjay,
How much time do we have?
we have not much time, but I want to hear about, sort of, you spent some time in India
Yeah.
and sort of just insights of being in that market and how differences and
So you'd start with the assumption that there's a lot of people out there, so consumer businesses, could be quite lucrative, popular. And then you realize that the ad market is tiny, right? In India, you have about 50 million PC users and about 100 million people who access the internet through various means. But the ad market in India is only about a tenth of the Russian ad market. It's about $200 million in India. The Russian market's about $2 billion. So very quickly you start to realize if you're a startup, if you're an internet business, you can't do.
why is that? Why is that?
Because it's the ad market is driven by e-commerce, and the e-commerce loop in India is quite open. That's changing very quickly with the universal ID that's coming out and will ramp up to about 300 million in the next couple of 3 years. But the whole payment processing, e-commerce on the web just doesn't work. It works for digital products, it works for tickets, it works for a small class of things, mobile games, those kinds of things. But for a vast majority of the products, it doesn't work, right? But at the same time, what you're seeing right now is a set of models, just straight up e-commerce is just starting to take off. And you can see in every category there are people going out and building websites. So you want to be as close to the transaction as possible, as far away from the ad model as possible in India. So straight up e-commerce sites work. The next category that works is the commission-based or the transaction fee-based, the agency-based model, kind of like Expedia. Make My Trip, which is a company that's a clone of Expedia, that just did $1 billion IPO. That model works as well. And the next model that is starting to work is the lead gen model. There is a very interesting lead gen company called Just Dial, which is basically far more effective than Google in India. The cost per lead is a lot less. The effectiveness is a lot more.
So why do you say that? So what is Just? So this is.
So Just Dial, you call up,
Yeah.
you call them up on the phone. They have a number in each city, and you say, "I need a doctor," and they find one for you.
Person.
They find a person, the right doctor, or find a company that can find you the right doctor.
A
Right.
person's on the other end.
So I've invested in a company which is basically OpenTable for doctors and hospitals and clinics. 80% of their traffic comes through Just Dial. 20%.
Is there a person on the other end of the
There's
line?
a person on the other end of
So
the line.
it's interesting. How does that? So does that scale?
It scales.
Because people are cheap and you
Yep,
have to hire
that's right.
them?
Exactly.
All right.
So if you're and I think I've now started looking at Thailand and the rest of Southeast Asia, and if you look at emerging markets in general, the closer you are to the transaction, better off, for a startup, the business model. So straight up e-commerce, percentage of the transaction, commission agency models, and now lead gen. I stay as far away from these businesses as possible for the next 3 to 5 years.
So what insights that you gained for this market, being in that,
So one of the things I really like about your business, this Doc Suggest, which does the OpenTable for doctors and clinics, their big focus is on the quality of the experience. They only get paid after the patient goes through the appointment, and the hospital pays them 10 to 15% of the patient revenue. And the quality of the service, the satisfaction, the whole process is fraught with kind of uncertainty issues. And if people feel good at the end of it, they start to recommend others, right? And so, at least in India and emerging markets, feet on the street, customer service personnel, people to assist with the whole process, even expensive, and it really does add a nice positive feedback